There are some people and some situations that shut down your common sense, even for people who didn't have trauma as a kid. You can be going along, doing pretty well, you're seeing life clearly, you're moving forward, your judgment is good, and then that one person comes along and it's like they cast a spell on you. They make you crazy with like weird signs that something's not right, and you don't know if you can trust yourself. So instead of thinking clearly, your mind stops working and you go into denial. Now, I'm not a therapist, but I'm someone who's recovered from getting into relationships with people who are lying to me. And I help other people get clear and get out of those situations too. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Evangeline, and she writes, "Hi, Anna. I've been in a relationship for 6 months and I recently moved in with my boyfriend. We live in different countries. I work remotely, and it just makes sense for me to make this step." All right, I've got my fairy pencil. I'm going to go through and circle things I want to come back to on a second reading on this letter, but let's see what's going on in Evangeline's life here. I've known my boyfriend for 16 years. He has liked me since high school, but I did not reciprocate. I always saw him as a friend, so we developed a great friendship over the years. At some point, 9 years ago, we lost contact. He didn't want to be friends anymore. And right before we lost contact, we had an attempt to date. And shortly after, I just wanted to go back to being friends, which was immature of me, Evangeline says. I just wasn't sure about him. And unfortunately, she says, I have led him on. We reconnected 2 years ago when he found out from a mutual friend that I had gone through cancer, and he reached out apologizing for cutting me off. He was also going through a rough time, struggling with alcoholism and going to rehab. He got to the point where he lost 3 jobs in a year. When he reached out to me last year, I felt overwhelmed by his issues and tried to show support, but not get entangled in his issues, as my own mental state was quite fragile after cancer. Eventually, he came home to sort some things out. We're from the same country. And he was in my city, so we met and everything was great. I showed my support for him, and he did the same for me. He went back to where he lives, and we kept in touch regularly. And after a couple of months, we took a short trip together. I was overwhelmed with a lot of my family issues and just needed a break, so we decided to do that. I told him that I'll go on this trip if we are clear on the fact that he can't have any expectations regarding us. We'll come back to that. He reassured me, and the trip was great indeed. After the trip, I started to become romantically attracted to him. We had a nice friendship before, so I guess it was easy. I didn't want to date him as I knew he was newly sober and needed to focus on himself. We eventually did start dating. 6 months in, I just moved in with him. Right before moving in, I had this clench in my stomach and this awful feeling, and all I could think about was, he's hiding something from me. I should not move in with him. I'm a very anxious person, diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, and I know this can happen, so I tried to brush it off. As long as I've known him, he's been kind, compassionate, extremely sensitive, but he had a hard time dealing with his extremely messy family situation in childhood. We love each other, and we see this becoming a long-term commitment, but we're having a few issues. 2 weeks after I moved in, he started becoming secretive with his phone. I never noticed that before. I confronted him a few times, and yesterday he broke down, saying he feels the need to eliminate any potential triggers that could set me off, because a few weeks ago he shared with me that in his addiction days, he used to get involved with sex workers. As he could not have proper relationships due to his addiction and mental issues. We're going to come back to this whole section. Shortly after, I mentioned to him that something that happened between us reminded me of the time when I was cheated on a long time ago. He said that he feels the need to defend himself because I'm being suspicious, and he feels it's unfair, and that is why he started becoming agitated around his phone. And it was getting worse every time I would confront him, turning on do not disturb status, leaving one of the phones in the living room overnight, declining a phone call on his work phone on a Saturday evening, etc. Yesterday, I confronted him again and he broke down. He said he's afraid I'm now suspicious of him because of his past and he's trying not to trigger me with his phone. He also cried and said he's afraid I think less of him now that he shared about himself and his experience with sex workers in the past, and that he feels extremely bad about himself and hasn't made peace with it yet. He also never had a relationship. He's 34, so he does not really have a good relationship framework. He also told me that I pointed that out, and now he feels inadequate. According to him, the only girl he ever pictured himself with was me. He said I was the only one who could understand him. I also come from a messy background. My father was an alcoholic. Sometimes I'm afraid I chose exactly what I'm running away from my whole life. During his childhood, his mom and dad always fought because his mom was extremely jealous, and yesterday he said this is exactly what he was trying to avoid, and yet it's happening. I told him I don't think he's cheating on me. I think he's hiding something else and is afraid to tell me because of how he thinks I might react. I tried to create a safe space for him every time, but I think he's too afraid to lose me sometimes. He seemed sincere, and I have no reason at all to think he's cheating on me, but I did think he's hiding something from his old past, be it even a platonic connection. Now I'm not sure anymore. He has lied to me once about quitting smoking. He said he was afraid of my reaction. There it is. And ever since I told him, my trust in him has been altered. I started having doubts since then. I feel like sometimes he's too afraid to upset me or even lose me, so he won't tell me the truth. So his explanation might very well be valid. Well, okay, maybe it's that. I'm not sure he told me everything. I feel like there's more to the story. My anxiety is extremely hard to deal with alongside the thought that I made a mistake moving in with him in a foreign country where I don't know anybody. What are your thoughts, Anna? All right, Evangeline, this is going to be... I do have some stuff for you here. What a hard situation. It's so interesting. You know, we've been talking lately about people who first come together as friends, and then it finally becomes romantic. And it sounds like your romantic feelings happened organically after this trip with him, after some years of being friends. But I see a lot going on here that's a pretty big red flag. So let's go through what you told me. You've been romantic with him for 6 months right now, and you recently moved in with him after just 6 months. You've been friends for a long time, but this is significant, okay? So you moved in with him. Well, I'll get to this in a minute. Probably not a good idea, all right? I've known him for 16 years. He's liked you since high school, but you didn't feel the same way for the longest time. At some point, you guys lost contact after an episode of trying to date, and you dated him, but you weren't into it. And you say that you led him on. Okay, maybe, I don't know. You say that, but you didn't give me any evidence that you led him on. You just here's this guy who's liked you for so long. Probably his like liking you energy is always like pushing up against you, and you're like, okay. It didn't sound like, it just sounded like it was very much coming from him, and finally you sort of gave in. You dated him, but you weren't sure about him. And then you're like, I led him on. And you're saying you were immature. I don't know. Well, maybe you just, maybe you were young and immature at the time. And maybe you decided to date him even though you sort of knew it was never going to work out. So lesson learned. Most of us have done that before. It's okay. But I guess, it probably hurt him a lot. But that's okay. That's part of what's involved in dating. When people are very damaged, or have serious issues going on, dating and then getting rejected by the person you date can be devastating, but that doesn't make the person who rejected you a bad person. Most dating arrangements are going to result in a breakup, instigated by one person or the other. That's the deal. So I want to just first give you permission to completely put down this idea that you did something bad by dating your friend who really liked you all this time and then realizing, you couldn't do it. But then you had cancer, and I'm really sorry, and sounds like you're through it now. I hope you are. And he reached out and apologized. And so you guys started talking, and it turns out he was struggling with alcoholism and going to rehab. So he got to the point where he lost 3 jobs in a year. So pretty bad dysfunction going on there. And when he reached out, you felt overwhelmed by his issues and tried to show support but not get entangled. because you were fragile from going through cancer. So yeah, I'm so proud of you actually for caring about your, giving yourself space. It sounds like you weren't able to do it in the end, but you do know that you need that you need that having survived cancer, that intense stress is like the worst thing for you. You need love, support, peace, good, nutritious food, right? Just the good things. So he came back to the home country where you live, and he was there. So you guys got together and you supported each other. It had been a long time. And then you stayed in touch. And after a couple of months, you took a trip together. All right. So I just want to say, everybody, taking a trip is a great way to find out what a relationship is made of, if it has potential. Taking a trip with somebody you don't want to sleep with, who is in love with you, is never a good idea. Yeah, it's never a good idea. It's I don't know. I totally get it, because when you don't have enough friends, when you don't have enough love in your life, somebody who's like held a torch for you, and I'm from reading your letter, I think maybe English isn't your first language. They've held a torch for you means they're just like waiting and loving you the whole time, hoping you'll finally love them. And so he got his wish. Yeah, you felt like you needed a break. You took the trip with your friend who's been pining away for you this whole time, the only girl he ever saw himself with. So I think that did you not know that? Did you not realize he felt that way? I'm just going to tell everybody, when somebody feels that way and you don't feel the same way, it is right to stay away, because it's just going to, it's just going to drag their heart around. There's no way around it. No matter what they say. He said some things here that he was fine about it. You said, oh, I'll go on the trip if you don't have any expectations regarding us. Well, people can't not have expectations. If they're into you, they can't not. And so you wanted to make clear you're not going to do anything, and he reassured you. But see, people who, especially like him, he's alcoholic, he's never had a relationship, he's only ever loved you, he's on a trip with you, he'll promise the moon for you to go on that trip. But he's basically like a hostage of his own feelings. He can't say no. He's not in a position to hold a boundary with you because his feelings are so strong, and his needs are not met, So you said after the trip, you started becoming attracted to him. You had a nice friendship before, so I guess it was easy. I did not want to date him as I knew he was newly sober and needed to focus on himself. We eventually started dating, and you don't say how long it was between, but yeah, newly sober people are not good to date, not just for your sake, but for theirs. For a newly sober person to get into a relationship, even a good one, can be so destabilizing it'll push them right back out into a relapse. And so it's usually not a good idea. Usually not. There are exceptions, of course. So I just moved in with him. And six months after beginning to date, you moved in. So yeah, it's very common and normal that people move in together. But I'm just going to tell you why. I don't think it's a great idea, not until there's like a serious commitment, marriage maybe, serious commitment. Because when you load up your newly formed relationship with also like you can't leave because it's where you live, it's where your money is sunk into the deposit or whatever it is, well, it makes it a lot harder to take a distance from the relationship and let the relationship grow naturally. It puts so much pressure on the relationship and puts this false structure on it. And it's very easy for people to feel like they're married just because they've moved in together, but no such commitment has been made, and people can get really hurt. I'm just going to add to that layer, he's newly sober. So I just think, I'm just going to tell you now, retrospecto goggles here. It's just not a good idea. But there you are. So right before moving in, you had a clench in your stomach and an awful feeling, and you just felt like he's hiding something from you. And I should not move in with him. So yeah, you have generalized anxiety disorder, and yeah, that's a thing, but that feeling in your gut upon moving in still carries a lot of weight, especially from the story, from what unfolds here, what you're about to tell me. So you tried to brush off your own inner warning sign. The red flags were flying, and you say, as long as I've known him, he's been kind, compassionate, extremely sensitive, but he's had a hard time dealing with his extremely messy family situation in childhood. Okay. This happens so much where somebody writes me a letter and they're in a relationship with somebody who's basically being impossible, who's being very difficult and is showing, just like red flags leaking everywhere, the problems, the writings on the wall. And the person writing me the letter tries to think of reasons to explain it. And while it's true that a difficult family situation in childhood does make things harder, a person who, just completely loses it over that and starts to act in a deceptive and blamey and bizarre way is not ready for a relationship. That's all. We don't have to judge them, but we got to stop explaining away the fact of the behavior. How a person acts in the relationship is your information about what am I getting into? That is what it is. It is the day-to-day experience of being with that person. So regardless of what the background was, because I think, even serial killers maybe had a bad childhood. That doesn't mean that we should make it okay and tolerate their behavior. So you said we love each other and we see this becoming a long-term commitment, but we are having a few issues. Okay, so that's interesting. You love him and you see this being a long-term commitment, but you feel like he's hiding something from you. So that's one thing that is antithetical to a long-term relationship, is hiding and lying. And especially at this early stage, this is a huge red flag. This is like a do not proceed behavior. Now, perhaps with more things worked out, or you go to counseling or something, or he gets more time sober, maybe it becomes a situation where he could actually be the sort of person who is invested in your well-being enough to want to be honest with you, to want to give you information and set your mind free and help you feel supported and safe in your life. That's what a couple does. That's what the people do for each other in a good relationship, is help each other be their best. If there's any deception, that is just, it's a don't go there. It's a deal breaker. Deception is a deal breaker. Now, he won't admit to deceiving you. He's admitting to lying by omission about something. So you said, as 2 weeks after you moved in, he started becoming secretive with his phone. So I'm just going to be honest with you. I can think of no reason to be secretive with a phone than that you're hiding who you're talking to. And you never noticed it before. So also, I'm just going to speculate because I don't know him and I don't want to slander him or anything. But 2 weeks after moving in to start doing some sort of sneaky behavior is consistent with, somebody who is avoidant or has an addiction and feels triggered. The whole thing of having somebody present all the time who's aware of what's going on, even though on one part of them, they really want that, they want you there. And I've done this, I've ended up in relationships with addicts before. So I'm just, forgive me if I'm projecting, but this is what happens. The commitment gets a little more concrete and tighter, and then, the bad behavior will start to sort of bust out. And so you could be right. If he's seen sex workers in the past, I would say that's my first bet. My second bet is drugs. That's my second bet. But it's something that he thinks if you knew, you wouldn't be there. So it's not good. He's probably right. So you confronted him a few times and he broke down and he said he feels the need to eliminate any potential triggers that could set me off, because he shared with me that in his addiction days, he used to get involved with sex workers as he could not have a proper relationship due to his addiction and mental issues. Okay, well, that's incompatible with a relationship. But if he's done with it and he has really cleared up and healed from that, great. I'm not getting that impression. If he was really over all of that, there would be no sneaky behavior. And I'll tell you, when I did the 12 steps, one of the things I did was write out any sneaky behaviors, because those have to be cleared up for somebody to get sober. So sneaky behavior is a red flag also that the sobriety is in jeopardy, if not already lapsed. I'm just saying, that's my experience. I don't know your guy. Shortly after, I mentioned to him that something had happened between us that reminded me of the time when I was cheated on a long time ago. So you're thinking cheating. I'm thinking sex workers. And if you can call that cheating, but I don't think it could be that. Or he said he feels the need, or it could be drugs. So he said that he feels the need to defend himself because I'm being suspicious and he feels it's unfair. And that is why he started becoming agitated around his phone. And it was getting even worse. Every time I'd confront him, he would turn on do not disturb status. He'd leave one of his phones in the living room overnight. He'd decline phone calls on his work phone on a Saturday evening. So I guess the speculation is he's got somebody, he said, here, use my work phone. She'll never think that it's that. Who knows? We don't know because you can't trust him, but I think you have every reason to distrust here. It is, yeah, I get the feeling you're getting. So yesterday I confronted him again and he broke down. He said he's afraid I'm now suspicious of him because of his past, and he's trying not to trigger me with his phone. So just the idea that he cannot trigger you, that's not it. He's blaming you, my dear. He's blaming you for being very unstable with all of his own behavior. He's afraid that you're suspicious of him because of his past. So when he's really done his recovery program, he's not going to be all messed up by the past. There's this saying in the 12 steps, we will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it, because it's been resolved, because everything that we did wrong has been amended. I don't know if he's in 12 step, but if he's not, anyway, I can tell he's not doing anything where he's really dealing with his past. He's completely externalized. It's like, you're freaking out about the past. Now we have a problem. It's like, well, of course you are. Of course, you're trying to like kid yourself and be like, I guess I'm being immature or unreasonable or too suspicious. But I don't think you are. Yeah, he's trying not to trigger you. I don't think he's trying to trigger you. I think he's trying not to get left by you when you find out what it is. He also cried and said he's afraid, I think less of him now, he's afraid that you think less of him now, that he shared about his experience with sex workers in the past. And he feels extremely bad about himself and didn't make peace with it yet. So in his recovery, he needs to make peace with it. That's not your problem. It's not your problem. And of course you have feelings about it, and you haven't done anything wrong. He also never had a relationship. He's 34. So that could happen. That could happen to a good person, but it question marks arise. Why? What's going on? So if he has alcoholism, I'm sort of surprised if the alcoholism only showed up recently, if it wasn't always there. That could happen too, but I don't know. So, not having a relationship and being alcoholic and getting involved in sex workers and not having the emotional maturity to take responsibility for the way he feels about his past and his ability to protect you from feeling threatened by it by being honest, open, reassuring in a credible way. He can't do that. He's just not got the chops right now to be a good partner. Yeah, and he said it makes him feel inadequate, that you don't think he's got a good relationship framework. So according to him, the only girl he ever wanted was you, okay? He said, I was the only one who could understand him, and you both come from messy backgrounds, and your father was alcoholic. I understand that kinship that we have, yeah. Sometimes I'm afraid I chose exactly what I'm running from my whole life. So you had an alcoholic parent too. That explains a lot. Gosh, that's got so much predictive power for the difficulties in relationships that so many of us end up having. I had 2 alcoholic parents and some alcoholic family members kind of all around. During his childhood, his mom and dad always fought because his mom was extremely jealous. And yesterday he said this is exactly what he was trying to avoid, and yet it's happening. Well, yeah, it's happening because of cagey behavior and a history of sex workers. I told him I don't think he's cheating on me. I don't know why you feel like you have to tell him that. I guess you might be buying into the idea that you think that you're doing something wrong by thinking this, but yeah. I think he's hiding something else and is afraid to tell me because how he thinks I might react. I tried to create a safe space for him every time, but I think he too is afraid to lose me sometimes. So I'm going to suggest that you don't feel responsible to make a safe space for him. You need space to react. You need space to feel the way you feel as you learn the truth about who this person is, who you're living with and thinking that you might marry. You do need to know the truth. Absolutely you do. And you need to have your reaction. And if that's leaving, it's leaving. It's immaturity that keeps him from being honest with you if the fear is, the truth will cause her to leave. How long does he want to manipulate you? To stay under false pretenses? I don't know. He seems sincere. I have no reason to think he's cheating on me. Well, I don't know why you say no reason. But I did think he's hiding something from his past. Maybe so, maybe so. There's a number of things it could be. It's something. I'd trust your gut on this. Now I'm not sure anymore. He's lied to me once about quitting smoking. He said he was afraid of my reaction. And ever since, I told him my trust in him has been altered. I started having doubts since then. Now, I know what it is. I know what it is to be, on his part, to be afraid of what people think, and to hide things. When I used to smoke, I used to hide it from people at work. I was afraid what they thought. But With a partner, that sneaky behavior is what it is. It's sneaky behavior. The part that you're reacting to is that he lied about it and hid it from you, not that he's smoking. And I would imagine you might not like that he smokes, but it's nowhere near as bad as him lying to you that he smokes. All right. So I feel like sometimes he's too afraid to upset me or even lose me, so he won't tell me the truth. Yeah, that's lame. I'm sorry. That's not an adult thing. You don't get to do that and have a good relationship. So his explanation might very well be valid. Maybe it is that. Okay, but Evangeline, I want you to just consider, don't buy into this idea that it's valid for him to be afraid that you would not like something, so therefore he has to lie. There's no excuse to lie. All right, but I'm not sure he told me everything. I feel like there's more to the story. So there it is. Your gut has spoken. And yeah, you have anxiety and maybe you make too much of things, but the hiding has to stop. So you asked my thoughts. And if you wrote to me and asked my thoughts, you kind of know, you probably knew what I was going to say. I think this guy is not in a place where he can be a good partner to you. It sounds like a lot of chaos. It sounds like he may be drinking or using again. I think drinking, see, I have way too much experience with this. Drinking doesn't lead to a lot of stuff on the phone. Seeing people who have drugs, communicating with people who will get you drugs, that's what has secret phone call behavior. And of course, sex workers and or other men or women who he might be seeing. So I think that's the part you think that he's not having a relationship with anybody. But when you say cheating, I don't think everybody considers seeing sex workers cheating exactly. And somehow, why do I sense that it might be that? I think it might be that. There are other things that could be porn, maybe he's being catfished. Something is going on that phone that doesn't bode well for your relationship. So Evangeline, I want to encourage you. You need support. You need support. You need somebody to talk to outside of this relationship who you can get some reflection on. How do you honestly feel about this? Where do you think maybe you're being unfair? Where do you think you're ignoring your instincts? What do you think, what are the conversations you'd like to be having with him? You need support for that. And I think everybody, if you had an alcoholic dad, you need tools for healing. I love 12-step programs because they're free and it's a place where you can meet other people who are getting honest. That's a lot of my early healing was going to a 12-step program for families of alcoholics. And you could too, and because you're now dating an alcoholic, I just can't recommend it enough. I think that would be very wise. You'd certainly be welcome in our membership program as well. Therapists can help with this, but this sounds, I don't know, there's some dark energy in this whole story you're telling me. And whatever you do, I encourage you, just don't silence yourself. Don't stuff your intuition down. Let yourself have your feelings about it. If you don't want to trouble the relationship every time you have a thought, have someone else to talk to about the relationship. And then you can be more selective about what you say with him. And so long as you want to maintain the peace with him, you can be peaceful and respectful and boundaried about leaking all your concerns to him. And when you want to have a big talk about your concerns, you can have a talk about your concerns. But it is not your fault, all right? His sneaky behavior and dishonesty is not your fault. You're not causing that because you don't like what it suggests. You're just being responsive to your own senses. And because you had cancer, gosh, I just really hope you don't end up in a high-stress relationship. And it sounds like this is tipping that way. And I know that ending a relationship causes a lot of stress too. But it seems to me when you're post-cancer, everything depends on being kind and loving to yourself, to your body, to your feelings, to your environment, and not introducing somebody, who's taking your radar and jamming it intentionally on your perceptions. I think that's one of the worst things that can happen to a person who's healing or fragile. So, yeah, that's what I think. If you want to get a read on red flags on people, I've listed a whole bunch of them, and it's a PDF that I created that anybody can download. You can get that right here, and I will see you very soon.